Dun, 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 dun. Welcome to Want to Talk. My name is Mike Wante, and I want to talk movies with you. Today we're talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog is based off the Sega Genesis game, My Childhood System. I know there were a lot of Nintendo guys, a lot of Sega Genesis guys. I fell on the Sega Genesis side. And Sonic, though, was pretty much the very first video game I ever played. And I believe it was actually Sonic the Hedgehog 2, so that was one of the greatest games I ever played in my life. Then I got to play all the other ones, Sonic Pinball, Sonic 3D, all the other ones that came out. And this movie tries to capture a little bit of magic from each of those games. So let's get into it. One of the first things I want to acknowledge is the fact that the fan base around Sonic the Hedgehog practically saved this film. Not so much on the story side, but on the design. It seemed that Sega was trying to do a new, weird redesign of Sonic the Hedgehog to make him maybe seem a little bit more realistic. And when the trailer released, there was so much backlash. They were taken down, and for once, the studio listened to the fans, and they gave them what they wanted. It cost more money. Not too much from what I understand, but still it cost money to go back and redesign and redo the whole entire film with a new design of Sonic the Hedgehog. And the design was well worth it. It made everyone excited, and we actually got to see a film that we wanted to see with the Sonic the Hedgehog that we know. So that was a bonus. So what the film does is it immediately starts on a point in the film that's a little bit in the future, so that way it can kind of grab your attention. And as soon as that happens, you hear Sonic narrate and it takes you back to his childhood. So that was kind of cool, seeing a little bit of history, not too much. We don't get a huge origin story about him. And the way that I'm comparing it in my head right now is like the film Bumblebee, where we see Cybertron and where Bumblebee is from and how he has to leave his home and go to a new world. One day, Sonic's power levels are read by Dr. Robotnik, played amazingly by Jim Carrey, who is probably the only person who could get away with playing this character. I was trying to think of who else could play Dr. Robotnik. And when they first announced Jim Carrey, I was like, yeah, why not? I mean, he's not the big husky guy we know from the video games, but he was awesome. And he was part of the comic relief of this film, and probably a major part of it. And that's what I really liked about it. And the story actually wasn't too bad. I was very afraid of the story because it kind of reminded me of that Woody the Woodpecker thing they did that went straight to like Netflix or Hulu or wherever it went, and that movie was horrible. So I was actually kind of terrified going into Sonic, so I brought my kids with me to see how they enjoyed it and how I would enjoy it in comparison. And it was kind of funny because we actually laughed at a lot of the same things. Some things I laughed at because, you know, they were dad jokes or adult jokes, and they laughed at some other stuff that I also thought was funny because, let's face it, I'm the third child. Fourth child. Wow, I have 3 kids. How did I forget that? So it was pretty interesting seeing the dynamic and how the comedy worked on both levels. Granted, it's a Thursday night, so not a lot of people are out there because they're going to probably take their kids this weekend. At least I'm hoping, because the movie wasn't that bad at all. And the thing I really did like about the movie is that it really plays off the video games as best as it can for the real world dynamic. Even, you know, we get the sense of Sonic is from a fantasy world versus James Marsden's character is from the real world. And it's pretty hilarious because it takes place in Montana, and Sonic the Hedgehog is known as this blue devil that only one man has ever seen because Sonic is taunting him. So that was freaking hilarious because now he's the crazy guy and no one believes him. Ben Schwartz is the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog, and if you're not quite sure who Ben Schwartz is, if you've seen Parks and Recreation, he is freaking hilarious in that show. And in this one, he's the voice of Sonic, and he's the worst. I'm just kidding, he's not that bad, but he kind of is, because I feel like he could have done something else with the voice. He probably could have used the voice of John Ralphio that he used in Parks and Rec, but maybe not. But he was pretty close to, and I guess maybe it's just the fact that I'm so used to the Sonic voice from like the classic cartoons, and he was pretty damn close to nailing the voice, and I think there's still something he could work on, but that was probably the least believable, and I think he was trying to appeal more to the kids, which this is definitely a kid's film. There's no doubt about that. Very minor violence, and when I say violence, I'm talking about just slapstick punching and stuff like that. It's nothing that the kids won't enjoy. The kids will have fun with this movie. There's nothing that they're going to be afraid of in this movie. And a lot of the adult comic relief really comes from Dr. Robotnik, so Jim Carrey, and his interactions with his employee and the robots that he makes, and his little quips that he says. And some of the stuff he says is kind of a little racy. But, it's going to go over the kids' heads, and the parents are going to be like, oh, dang, maybe Dr. Robotnik's kind of racist. I think it's going to be a good time. So I think it's definitely a movie worth taking your kids to. If you're just a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, that's something worth seeing. I like the way that they incorporated some of the game elements, like the fighting that we actually play in the games. The actual collecting of the rings and the use of those rings, and just a couple of quick characters. And they didn't really expand too much on the universe. It was concentrated on Sonic, which I really did like. We get a glimpse of his world, a glimpse of some characters. And the good thing is that they kind of, they leave it open for a second installment. And that's where we can start getting into the new characters and the characters that we like. So I'm looking forward to that. And I hope this movie does well so we can get those characters into a film. Overall, I want to say I had a good time with Sonic the Hedgehog, and it's worth taking the kids to the theater. So I'm going to give it 3 stars. That's my review for Sonic the Hedgehog. Make sure that you follow, like, and subscribe. Comment below and let me know what you thought of Sonic the Hedgehog if you catch it this weekend. There's a couple other movies, so if you see those instead, let me know what you thought. Other than that, I'm Mike Wanthe with Want the Talk. That's a wrap.